My name is Tomos Rees. I am the CEO and co-founder of Philanthrify, and at Philanthrify we are building a giving platform where we prove the impact of donations for the donors giving to charity. Blockchain technology was something I knew nothing about back in 2017. I heard Bitcoin was doing very well for an investment wise, and that was something I was doing quite a lot of at the time. So I then decided to just put some money in and just see how it did. 3 years later, I just left it and I came back and the investment was doing quite well. So I decided to actually look into it because I felt it was a bit crazy that I had a bit of money in something that I didn't even know anything about. And that's when I read the white paper. That's when I read all the other white papers for pretty much most of the L1s at the time through that ICO phase. And I fell in love with the combination of mathematics, game theory, and just pure decentralized ownership that the blockchain space brings. And the fact that it could actually hold truth on chain one day, which sounds a bit like a naive fantasy, but at the time I really liked the idea. And so I became more involved in different communities. I then became heavily involved in MultiversX, formerly known as Elrond at the time. I went to a few conferences, X Days, and met some great people. And from there, the bond just grew. I started writing a lot more about it, more technically speaking, advising some companies on architecture and a few just methods. And then I really felt it was time for me to do my own thing. I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to start my own company. And I felt the time was right, the knowledge was right, and the market was early enough to really do something amazing. So I had a lot of experience in the charity space. I had a lot of experience in the fintech space, and I decided to bring them all together with blockchain technology. And so I left my job and I started Philanthrify. It's a good question. I think with MultiversX, like a lot of people, or Elrond at the time, it was mainly about the technology. I think that's what everyone came into it for. It wasn't really about the money, because at that time it wasn't doing very well, although it did in the end in the last bull run. And I was involved in Cardano and Solana for a little bit of time, but the technology was always so far behind. I felt things were moving very quickly with MultiversX. I liked the scaling architecture, the fact that it could actually bring scalability to the blockchain. And I just liked the way that the team was building. They were really pushing hard, pushing out new things all the time, really cool products that actually brought in the user experience in a nice way. And that's something I've always felt companies need to do if they really want to be successful. And so that's something that we've prioritized quite a bit with Philanthrify. And in our recent testing, that's been something that we've been pushing quite hard on. So I'd say those are the main reasons. It was never, hype or money or anything. Otherwise, it probably would have been a different chain. And the reason why we built on MultiversX is because, well, we know the technology so well. We know the team are really trying to make it the best experience for the developers. And that's obviously a very key thing, because, for example, in the UK, because of regulations, because of politics, there aren't many people here that do blockchain projects or work in the blockchain space, because there's better places to do it. Portugal, Dubai, America now. So I actually have to bring a lot of our developers from the Web 2 space into the Web 3, and onboarding them, teaching them how to do all of these kind of things is a very difficult process. And MultiversX is one of the best for doing that. I grew up in the charity space. My parents run charities. My family's always been involved in them. My grandfather ran a couple of charities when he was a younger man. Our family, I won't go into it very long, but they came from very modest background. And so when they started to do much better, they had better jobs, they really wanted to give back as much as possible. Obviously, also quite a religious family, so in that way they also wanted to give back a lot of what they earned. And so through this experience in the charity, it was a charity in Africa where we were doing a lot of projects out there. I was helping with the small technology small things, doing fair to, Christmas markets, all of that kind of stuff to raise some money. And then when I became 12 years old, I was finally taken out to Uganda, where I actually saw the projects. I saw the people who were suffering so much, and I saw the impact that this money is really having on their lives. And it was almost surreal coming back and speaking to some of these donors who had given, quite a lot of money to this charity and to these projects, but they didn't feel like, they were really involved in the process. They were asking, so what is it really like? How are these projects going? How can we, maybe get more involved? And the charity at the time, it was a very small charity. We don't have the resources to really engage the donors because we don't have full-time staff. We don't have anyone who can, keep up to date all the time. And so I think a lot of that really hit me hard, how technology could really solve these problems. And I felt there's so much in the charity space about not spending money on admins, on salaries, on all of these kind of things. You need to spend all of the money on the impact. And I think that's a great thing. But at the same time, these charities have resources. They are essentially a business. It's just, instead of making profit, they're making social impact in the world. And they need a lot of support, but no companies really, technology, are taking them seriously, because technology companies are mostly about profit, and you're not going to get a huge amount of profit in the charity industry. So that's why I really wanted to, jump in and almost bring like a top quality startup, maybe not quite Silicon Valley level, but hopefully one day, to the charity space, to be able to basically go from donation to received in charity to running the project to creating the impact to bringing the donor along for the whole journey, all in an automatic, nice flow. And so I think it's a great question. I think the point you mentioned as well about, I obviously didn't know the impact as well. I think that's one reason why it struck me so hard, because it wasn't just about the fact that these donors I was talking to didn't realize, but it was the fact I realized that I myself had no clue until, I really experienced in it and I saw what went into these projects. And then I guess to your question on the governance and everything like this, I think that's a very important point. I think transparency over time is something which builds trust, but it also allows people to decide themselves, whether this story is correct, whether, these funds are going into the right places. And that's the reason why I felt that was very important. One of the reasons I say, I talk about recently actually, is about who are the people trust most these days. And it's vloggers. Normally, it's people that they see every single day. They see what's happening in their lives. They feel like they're part of the journey. They can say, I've been following this person for 4 months. Almost a bit like a brag. It's like they're proud of it. And I want that same thing to come to the charity space. But obviously a lot of responsibility comes with that. And so we've been really focusing very hard with our platform on making sure that governance is actually held within the charity, but not just within the charity, within the overall ecosystem at large as well. We're integrating a lot of technologies to be able to verify the information going on there, but also almost a little bit like an auditing check as well, with an algorithm that we're building for transparency. The more transparent a charity is, the more likely it is that their story is actually checking out and people trust it. The less transparent they are, the more opaque it is, and this is where you get a lot of misuse of funds. I'll quickly say 2 things with the misuse of funds. One of them, I have seen examples, quite a few, of even people like the WHO, such a big organization, misusing funds massively in Africa, but I've also seen small charities as well misusing them for other projects that they felt might actually get them more donations from a different donor. But the other thing I would say is I've also seen things where it's a misuse of funds, but it also was the correct thing to do at the time. Sometimes And this is obviously a difficult thing to talk about, because how do you really confirm that that was a good use of funds? But I've seen someone take some funds short term for an emergency project which they had no funding for, and the reason they took it was because the other project didn't have the money at the time, and that bought them the time to be able to fulfill the emergency that had to be done, and then fulfill raising the money for the other project, which they then paid back the emergency funds. So there's always a lot of nuance, and I think that's just the way the world is sometimes. But overall, I do believe that the transparency really does play out. At least having some context around a lot of these things can help the story a lot. And even raising funds in this country is quite difficult when you talk about blockchain technology, especially with grants. We were turned down from our first Innovate UK grant because we talked about blockchain, and the person who was assessing us didn't understand what we were saying. So we had to clear that up. But I guess the answer to the question is, I mean, obviously I'm very close to the technology, so I have some bias, but I do truly believe that having an immutable ledger is one of the most powerful things you can have when it comes to transparency. Any company can have a ledger and then have transactions and then say, this is what's happening, and then change it later on. It could even be not a whole company thing, it could be one employee. You know, if we went up to 100,000 employees, one employee could be bribed, or, you know, even one charity or a hacker can come in, change all of this information, and all of a sudden the whole trust is broken down. And once the trust is broken down, you're never getting back up again, especially when this is our whole mission, this is our whole vision, this is what we want to see for the space. And so when you're looking at trying to make sure that those things don't happen, why not use the most immutable technology out there, which is blockchain technology, because of its decentralized nature of validation. There's a number of other reasons why we decided to use blockchain, but that's the core one. A couple of the other ones are the control that you can have within a platform. You can have really cool ecosystem benefits. You can have cool mementos with actual proof of history attached to them. A lot of people are doing collector's items now on blockchain technology. You can do the same thing with mementos of, I was the first donor for this project became massive, the charity grew hugely. All of a sudden you've got that bragging right in a way that you were part of that journey and you were a big part of it. And then you can also do things like voting on-chain, a little bit of governance on-chain. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with it. But the main one is that immutability and transparency. And I think when you combine immutability and transparency, that's the best way to build trust. Donors should use Philanthrify because they will actually be able to see where their personal donations are going and follow these projects in real time, making them feel like they're involved with the journey of the charity. And I think that's a very powerful thing. So for the charities, I think there are two parts, but I'll say it in one sentence. For the charities, it's really innovative for them because they can actually engage with all of their donors on a personal level at a large scale. And then the other benefit is they have the most cutting edge innovative technologies at their fingertips in a way that they've never had before, in a way that businesses in other industries have every day, because there are thousands of companies facilitating these needs. But for once, charities will have this as well.